So we want to talk about Zakat Al-FiTr today. And Zakat Al-FiTr is an easy chapter, and it's a brief chapter. It doesn't take a long time to cover. So I want to supplement that with some extra zakah information also. So our lesson today, inshallah, will be about Zakat Al-FiTr specifically, but also with some general zakah information also. So as zakah, you know that zakah is one of the five most important matters in Islam. And whoever denies the obligation of zakah blasphemes. The word zakah, or you could say zakat, it's not wrong to say zakat or zakah, linguistically means growth and addition or extra and blessing and purification and rectification or redemption. And it means abundant goodness. That's similar to the meaning of blessing, because blessing is ziyadatul khayr, abundant goodness, kathratul khayr. So it's called zakah because the money increases by the blessing of its distribution and by the supplication of the one who takes that money. And the zakah is the name of a specific amount of money paid to specific types of people under conditions. When we say money here, remember, money means religiously anything with monetary value religiously, not just cash. So clothing, that's money. And real estate, that's money. And uh, animals, that's money. Not a dog or a pig, though. Those are not money. So all of that is money. Zakah is particular money paid to particular people in a particular way. Particular money that's taken from particular money. So you have a source of money, particular money, yani not any money. You don't pay zakah for having chickens or donkeys or real estate, land, for example. There's no zakah for having land or buildings. So from particular money, camels, cattle, sheep, goats, etc., gold, silver, etc., from that particular money, you're going to take some money and then pay that to particular people in a particular way, yani with an intention. Zakah is one of the chapters of knowledge that we, the laymen, are weak in because of not being involved in it like other things such as purification and prayers. The zakah is paid for three reasons. One is for having some items. Doesn't matter what's the value of those items, that's not the issue. Some items that you have, you're gonna have to pay zakah. Yani zakah is linked to these items, not to their value, not how much they cost. What are those items? Got the livestock, camels, cattle, sheep, and goats. So how much do those camels cost? That's not the point here. It's just having the camels or the cows. I said camels, cattle. Say camels, cows, sheep, and goats. How much do your sheep cost? That doesn't matter. Just for having the sheep, and there's conditions there. We're not going to go over all of that. So livestock, or you could even say cattle, what means though, camels, cows, sheep, and goats. That's a reason for having to pay zakah. Bullion, that's gold and silver specifically. So how much does that gold cost? That's not the issue. How much it costs is not the issue. It's just by being gold. Whether it's the most precious gold you could have or it's the least precious gold you could have. If it's gold, then you have to pay a zakah if all the conditions are fulfilled. Gold and silver, that's bullion. And non-perishable grains or cereals or seeds, all those mean the same thing here. And this is relevant here for Zakat Al-FiTr we want to talk about. And the fruit also is relevant because this is what you're going to be paying for Zakat Al-FiTr. But what we're saying right now is these are also items that are subject to zakah. How much are your grains worth? Your cereals or your seeds? How much are they worth? That's not the point here. It's just the item itself with its conditions. For having that, you need to pay zakah. And fruit, what we mean specifically, dates and raisins. Dates and raisins. Nothing more. How much are your dates worth? You have the nice plump juicy ones, or you have the dry ones that aren't so tasty? Doesn't matter. This zakah is just for having the items. If all the conditions are fulfilled, you're going to have to pay zakah for having these dates or raisins. So that's one type of zakah. What did we start by saying? We said zakah is paid for 3 reasons. So one is for having certain items. What are those items? There's 4 branches of those items. Cattle, which means camels, cows, sheep, and goats. That's 1. 2, bullion, gold and silver. We're still under items only. Items. 3, staple crops. I mean, the cereals or the grains. And 4, the dried fruits, in particular, only dates and raisins. So have that in mind for yourself. That helps you when you're giving dawah and you need to talk. Then you can talk in general words there, and then you can run that down. Cattle, camels, cows, sheep, goats, gold, silver, staple grains, and dates and raisins. All of that has its details behind it. The second reason for having to pay the zakah is for value. Now we want to talk about value. That's going to be if you're a trader. For the value of trade merchandise, not the product itself. This is not a zakah for having an item. This is a zakah for having a value. The item is not important. It's the value. So what do you trade? What's your hustle? Incense and oils? Cars? Or something else? It's not the item itself that matters. It's the value. So if you have the value according to conditions, if you have certain value according to conditions, you're going to pay the zakah of gold or silver. Now, we're not going to stop here to unravel that. Just giving you quick background information. And these 2 that we just talked about, this having certain items and having value because you're a trader, these are called zakatul mal, money zakah. Money zakah. But what we want to talk about today is not money zakah. We want to talk about today, we want to focus on the third reason for having to pay zakah, which is because of supporting Muslim bodies. And that's called Zakat Al-Abdan, the body zakah, the zakat of bodies. Bodies, yes, because of having to support Muslim bodies. So, if one has an excess of money, extra money, money left over for the day of the Eid and the following night, money left over, well, what do you mean money left over? What did the other money get spent on? Well, you're going to spend that money on what you need for yourself and for your dependents, even your animals. If you have animals that you need to provide for, then that money that you spend to support yourself and your dependents, including your animals, what support? Lodging and clothing and even a servant if you need it. And also, you had some money and you bought sweets for the Eid. Then, after all of that, you still have some money left over after you calculated your lodging for yourself and your dependents, including your animals, and clothing for yourself and your dependents, and the sweets for the Eid also. And if you have a servant that you need, then also that. So after all of that, you still have money left over. And also your debts. Debt prevents the obligation of Zakat Al-FiTr. Debt prevents the obligation of Zakat Al-FiTr. So you calculated your debts, even if they're not due. And all of what we already said, the lodging, the clothing, the sweets for the Eid, for yourself and your dependents. Then you still have money left over. Then you're going to have to pay Zakat Al-FiTr unless someone's paying that on your behalf. Unless someone pays that on your behalf, you have to pay it. What does that mean, one pays on your behalf? Well, one has to pay for himself. So that's going to be for a man all the time. Pubescent man who has the money left over. He's going to have to pay Zakat Al-Fitr. And he has to pay for any Muslim he must support. That's what means he pays on someone else's behalf. So let's say you had a pubescent man and a pubescent woman, and they had money such that they're obligated to pay Zakat Al-Fitr. Then both of them, each one, that man and that woman, has to pay Zakat Al-Fitr. We'll talk about the time when we come to that. So now let's say this man married this woman. Now she's his wife, a Muslimah. She's his wife, this Muslimah, and he's obligated to support her. So then she doesn't have to pay because someone's going to pay on her behalf, which is her husband, because he's obligated to support her. So now he's going to pay zakah for himself, yani on his own behalf, and on behalf of his wife, his Muslimah wife. So you have to pay for anyone, on behalf of anyone you're obligated to support. Why would you be obligated to support someone? Because of marriage, like your wife, or relation, like your non-pubescent child, or even ownership, so your Muslim slave, but you only have to pay on behalf of Muslims, only on behalf of Muslims. So if a Muslim man had a non-Muslim wife, his wife is kafirah, or he has a non-Muslim slave, then he is obligated to support those, but he's not obligated to pay Zakat Al-FiTr on their behalf. So one has to pay Zakat Al-FiTr on behalf of his non-pubescent child, because he's obligated to support that child. But what if that child had his own money? What if you had a child and your child is rich? Like your child got an inheritance. Your child is richer than you, but didn't reach puberty yet. And as you know, is therefore restricted from spending his own money. But nevertheless, it is his money, so he's rich. Or just has money, let's say, even if they're not rich. Then the parent, the father, can still pay the Zakat Al-Fitr on behalf of this child. And he does not have to ask for permission from that non-pubescent child to pay on his behalf. But he cannot pay on behalf of his same pubescent child without permission. If you have a sane pubescent child, so your child's what, 14, 15, for example, sane and pubescent. So you're not obligated to support this child anymore. And you're supporting that child, if you are, is a charity. So don't forget to correct your intention. So you're not obligated to support that sane pubescent child. Then you cannot pay on behalf of that sane pubescent child of yours without permission. You need to ask that child for permission if you want to pay on their behalf. You need to say, do you accept for me to pay Zakat Al-Fitr on your behalf? And then if the child says yes, then you may. Just like a stranger. You can't pay a stranger Zakat Al-Fitr unless you take their permission. And amongst the people that you would be obligated to support is your poor Muslim parents. So let's go back to our scenario. We said there was a pubescent man and a pubescent woman. Before they got married, each one was obligated to pay Zakat Al-Fitr on his own behalf, his or her own behalf. But then he married her, and then it became obligatory on him to pay Zakat Al-Fitr on his behalf and on her behalf. And then Allah Ta'ala blessed them with a Muslim baby. So now he has to pay Zakat Al-Fitr on his own behalf and his wife's behalf and this baby's behalf, this Muslim baby. And then he got a Muslim slave. So now he has to pay on his own behalf, his wife's behalf, his baby's behalf, and his Muslim slave's behalf. Now, if he married a kafirah and got a kafir slave, he doesn't have to pay on their behalf because they're not Muslims. But then his Muslim father and Muslim mother were poor. So now he's obligated to support his poor Muslim parents. He's obligated. And he's not even allowed to tell his dad to go work. He can't say, Dad, you're strong. Go and work. He can't do that. So he has to support his poor Muslim parents. So he has to pay on his own behalf, and his wife's behalf, and his child's behalf, and his Muslim slave's behalf, and on behalf of his poor Muslim father and his poor Muslim mother. But what if his poor Muslim father had another wife who's not his mother? he doesn't have to pay Zakat Al-FiTr for her. Even though he's obligated to support her, his father's wife, who's not his mother, his poor Muslim father's wife, he has to support his poor Muslim father and his poor Muslim father's wife. But he doesn't have to pay zakah for his poor Muslim father's wife. He would have to pay the zakah for supporting his poor Muslim mother, though. And the grandfather is like the father. So if you had to support if your Muslim grandfather was poor, you'd be obligated to support him. So then you'd be obligated to pay Zakat Al-FiTr on his behalf. So is there any questions so far?
Yes, I have a question.
Yes, please.
I wanted to know if a woman is divorced and she's living with the children who are not pubescent, is it the father who needs to pay the Zakat Al-FiTr on behalf of them?
You said a woman is divorced?
Yes.
And what? Can you repeat, please?
She lives with the children that she had with the man who divorced her, who are not pubescent. Is it the father who needs to pay on behalf of the children concerning the Zakat Al-FiTr?
Yes. Yes. The father has to pay. He has to pay on behalf of his Muslim children who didn't reach puberty, even if he was not married to their mother anymore, because he's the one who's obligated to support them. Ameen wa fikum. Okay. So concerning this Zakat Al-FiTr, which is the zakah that you're obligated to pay for supporting Muslims, what must one pay? For supporting Muslims, one must pay in seeds of the dominant fresh staple crop. Seeds, if we're talking about grains, or fruits. And we're talking about here dates and raisins only. So the seeds, the cereals or the grains that are subject to zakah, that's what's going to get paid for zakah. Or the fruits that are subject to zakah, which that's dates and raisins, that's what's going to get paid for Zakat Al-FiTr, not something else. So you're not going to pay animals for Zakat Al-FiTr, and you're not going to pay gold or silver for Zakat Al-FiTr. One must pay in seeds of the dominant fresh staple crop. Dominant according to the town of the one who's paying, or the town of who's being paid on his behalf. Meaning, so let's say a man lives in a town where the dominant staple is wheat, and he pays on his own behalf. So then he's going to have to pay for Zakat Al-FiTr wheat, just the seeds, not something else. He's not going to pay bread, wheat bread, and say, well, it's wheat. No, it's not valid. Not oatmeal and say, this is wheat oatmeal. That's not valid. Or anything else like that. Burghul or couscous or something, just the seeds themselves. Because with the seeds, the original grains, you can achieve all those offshoots there. You can get the bread, or you can get the oatmeal, or whatever you want from the original grains. So that's what you pay, just the original grains. And don't say, well, what is a person supposed to do with these grains? Don't worry about that. That's not your business. Just pay it to somebody and fulfill your obligation. Correct your intention, put a bag of seeds in someone's hand, and go on about your merry business. So one has to pay in seeds the dominant staple fresh crop. So let's say the man who pays on his own behalf lives in a town where the dominant staple is wheat. So then he has to pay wheat. Now, let's say his wife is in Malaysia. So he has to pay on behalf of his wife. Though he's not there with her, he's in a town where the most dominant grain is wheat, and his wife is where the most dominant grain is rice. Then he has to pay, when he pays on her behalf, he has to pay rice. Because you have to pay the grain that's the dominant town of the payer. The payer. But the one you're paying on their behalf, since you're paying on their behalf, it's still like they're the payer, but you're just paying on their behalf. So his wife, who's in Malaysia, or did I say Indonesia? She's over there. Then he's paying on her behalf. So it's like she's the payer, but he's paying on her behalf. So he has to pay what she would pay. And since she's there in Indonesia or Malaysia, then she would be paying rice. So he needs to pay rice for his wife and pay wheat for himself. So and that's what we have here. So one must pay in seeds of the dominant fresh staple crop. The obligation is to pay the most prominent grain of one's town when paying for oneself. If paying for another, then the most dominant grain of his town. And paying in a grain that is better than the dominant grain is permissible. So he could pay wheat for his wife because wheat is better than rice. So the rule is you need to pay the dominant staple or a superior staple, the dominant grain or a superior one. And their ranking is that the top rank is wheat. Second rank is barley. Third rank is rice. Fourth rank is dates. And fifth rank is raisins. Although those aren't cereals, but overlook the lack of better words at the moment. And the person who's in the outskirts without grains, yani outside of a town, he lives where there's no dominant grain, then he pays the grain of the closest town. And for each individual is due a sa' by the measure of the Prophet's time, alayhi salatu wassalam. And a sa' is 4 muds. The mud is 2 average hands cupped together. 2 average hands cupped together. So since that's clear, I'm going to now call that, for the sake of ease, I'm going to call that a bowl. A bowl. Okay? It's easier for me to say it like that. So it means what I just told you. When I say bowl, it means a mud. 2 average hands cupped together. So this bowl of the most dominant grain, one has to pay 4 of those. 4 of those bowls equals a sa'. And the Prophet's sa' is preserved. So one has to pay that much. Any question? And all of what we're covering is the Shafi'i school, as you're well aware. The heart's intention for every type of zakah, how do you intend? The time of the intention is at the time of isolating that money. Money? I thought we had to pay grains for Zakat Al-FiTr. Yes, because grains are money. Money means anything with monetary value. So this statement is the general statement for all the types of zakah. Your intention is when you isolate that zakah payment from the rest of your money. Or you can make the intention when submitting the payment to the zakah collector. If you submitted your payment to the zakah collector, that's valid. And you don't have to intend where the money came from. So a sufficient intention is like, this is the zakah for my body, or this is the zakah for the Muslim bodies I support, or this is the obligatory charity on my money. All of those are valid intentions. And there's still a little bit left to mention here. Is there a condition existing? Is there a condition that has to be present in this one that you pay on their behalf? And when do you have to pay? For supporting bodies, there are different sayings about the time of its obligation. What is most prominent is what Ash-Shafi'i documented in the New School: by the last sunset of Ramadan. By means here because of, or at the time of, the last sunset of Ramadan, meaning the sun went down and Ramadan is over now. The whole month is over now. It was the last sunset of Ramadan. Now the time of Zakat Al-FiTr comes in. It starts then. The time of the termination of fasting, as mentioned in a hadith. And when it comes to the people that you pay on their behalf, you need to be obligated to support them for a part of Ramadan and a part of Shawwal. Shawwal is the month after Ramadan. So if a man married a woman on the last day of Ramadan and she was still his wife when the sun went down, then, if he was obligated to support her, then he has to pay Zakat Al-FiTr for himself and on her behalf. But if she died before the sun went down for Ramadan, the last Ramadan sunset, she was alive during Ramadan, but she died before the sun went down, then he's not obligated to pay Zakat Al-FiTr on her behalf. Or let's say his baby was born after the sun went down. The baby was not born inside of Ramadan. The baby was born after the sun went down. Then he would not be obligated to pay Zakat Al-FiTr for this Muslim baby, on behalf of this Muslim baby. So this person that one pays on their behalf because of being obligated to support them, he would have to be obligated to support them for a part of Ramadan and a part of Shawwal, the month after Ramadan. Therefore, according to the most prominent saying, had one gained possession of a Muslim slave after sunset, or had a child been born even 1 moment after sunset, or he married after the sunset, he would not be obligated to pay zakah for them. And the other saying is that Zakat Al-FiTr becomes obligatory by the break of dawn. So the strong saying, the saying that we usually teach if we're not going to give details, is just when the sun goes down, that's when the time of Zakat Al-FiTr comes in. But there's another saying in the school that the time of paying Zakat Al-FiTr doesn't start until the morning, the dawn, the Fajr. But it's permissible to pay Zakat Al-FiTr from the beginning of Ramadan. It's permissible. It won't be obligatory to pay it at the beginning of Ramadan, but it would be permissible and valid if you hastened and paid Zakat Al-FiTr early from the first of Ramadan, for example. You need to pay it before the sun goes down on the Eid. Before the sun goes down on the Eid. So its time comes in, the obligatory time for paying Zakat Al-FiTr is when the sun goes down on the last day of Ramadan, and you have until the sun goes down for the Eid. Any question?
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
Sheikh, is a person allowed to substitute the common staple of the town that they're in for money?
Not according to the Shafi'i school. But according to Shafi'i, you're only going to pay food. If you can only afford to pay for one person, let's say you had to pay for yourself and your wife, but you could only afford the extra money that you had left over was enough for one of you, then you pay on behalf of yourself. Can two people give their zakat to the same person? Well, if that person is eligible for zakah, then yes. If he's eligible for zakah, he can. Yani we can just quickly name the people who are eligible for zakah without reading their details. Who are eligible for zakah? 8 types of people, as you know, as mentioned in the Quran. Allah Ta'ala says, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم إنما الصدقات للفقراء والمساكين والعاملين عليها والمؤلفة قلوبهم وفي الرقاب والغارمين وفي سبيل الله وابن السبيل فريضة من الله والله عليم حكيم. The obligatory charities are only for the impoverished. Those are the people who can't even get half of their daily needs. If he needed $10 per day, he could get 2 or 3 or 4, for example. The needy, those are the people who they can get more than half of what they need per day, but not all. So they have something to fulfill their needs, but not everything. So if he needed $10 per day, he could get 6 or 7, for example. Then he's also still eligible for zakah. And the zakah officials appointed over the charities, appointed by the caliph specifically, and those whose hearts require reconciliation. That's requires some explanation, like some new Muslims. There's details there, though. And the slaves who have a contract for purchasing their freedom. And the indebted, those who have debts. And the volunteer fighters for the sake of Allah, those who are not registered soldiers. And the stranded traveler, those are the people who can receive zakah payment. So does it have to be cash? No. According to Shafi'i, it cannot be cash. According to Shafi'i, Zakat Al-FiTr is only going to be paid in food. Also, if you paid more, whether you pay in cash, according to Abu Hanifa, or you pay in food, according to Ash-Shafi'i, firstly, you are not allowed to pay more than what's obligatory to pay. Just like when you pray, if you wanted to pray Dhuhr, you can't pray 5 rak'ahs and say, I just want to throw an extra one in there for the sake of Allah. It's not valid. Same thing for zakah. You cannot throw anything extra in there. You have to only pay exactly what you're obligated to pay.
I have a couple questions. Do you mind?
Okay. No, go ahead, please.
All right. So if a person didn't have the money left over for a long time, money left over so they can pay the zakah, they don't have to, do they have to make it up?
No.
Okay. Alhamdulillah. But what if they had the money and they just forgot to pay the Zakat Al-FiTr?
They will have to pay it.
And what if they forgot the exact amount of time? Like, I don't know if it was 2 years or 3 years. Do they take the
He has to
greater
pay what
number?
he's sure of. He has to pay what he's sure of.
Okay.
Just like if he had prayers to make up or fasting to make up and he forgot the exact number, he's obligated to do what he's 100% sure of.
Right.
That's his obligation.
Barakallahu feek.
Ameen wa feek. طيب بارك الله فيكم وجزاكم الله خيرا. MashaAllah. May Allah grant us all a successful Ramadan this year. Subhanallah, it's almost over. I really enjoyed this Ramadan and Allah helped me by His mercy, and I hope that He helped you also. And may He continue to help us, and may He bless you and accept you and grant you the good that you ask for, and bless your families and bless your money. Allahumma ameen.